I trusted her with my secrets, my tears, and my heartbreak. I leaned on her when my relationship fell apart. And then one invitation changed everything. Because the man waiting at the altar was the one I used to love. And the bride smiling back at me was my best friend. I used to believe that betrayal always came from strangers, from people who never really knew you. I believed the ones closest to you were safe, that love and loyalty formed some invisible shield around friendships that had survived years of laughter, secrets, and shared pain. I was wrong, and I learned that lesson the hard way. The kind of way that settles into your bones and changes how you see people forever. My name doesn't matter as much as the story does, but I'll tell you this much. I was the kind of woman who trusted deeply, loved honestly, and believed that my best friend would never, ever hurt me in the one way she knew would destroy me. Her name was Lena. We met in our early 20s, both trying to find our footing in a world that felt too big and too fast. We bonded over late-night conversations, cheap coffee, and dreams we were too scared to say out loud to anyone else. When I met Adam, she was right there beside me, squealing with excitement, asking questions before I'd even finished telling the story. Adam became part of our little circle quickly. He'd tease Lena like a sister, bring her snacks when she came over, and joke that if we ever broke up, she'd have to pick sides. We laughed then, because breaking up felt impossible. Adam and I were together for 6 years. 6 years of growing up side by side, learning each other's flaws and imagining a future that felt solid and real. We talked about marriage, about kids, about where we'd live someday. Lena was there through all of it. She helped me pick out dresses for weddings we attended together, listened when Adam and I argued, and reassured me when doubt crept in. I trusted her completely. I told her things I never told my own family. When Adam and I finally ended things, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. The breakup wasn't explosive. It was slow, quiet, and painful, the kind where love hasn't vanished, but hope has. We wanted different things, or at least that's what we told ourselves. I remember sitting on my couch afterward, staring at nothing, while Lena held my hand and told me I'd be okay. She brought over food I didn't eat, stayed the night when the silence felt unbearable, and promised me that I wasn't alone. Those months after the breakup were some of the hardest of my life. I questioned everything, my worth, my choices, my future. Lena became my anchor. She reminded me to get out of bed, to shower, to try again. She listened to me cry about Adam, about how I missed the way he laughed, the way he used to hold my hand in public like he was proud to be with me. Never once did she tell me to stop talking about him. Never once did she seem uncomfortable. I thought that meant she cared. Looking back now, I replay every moment, every look, every pause. But at the time, I was too broken to see what was forming right in front of me. I didn't notice how Lena stopped asking about my dating life while becoming strangely quiet whenever Adam's name came up. I didn't question why she seemed distracted when we talked, checking her phone more often, smiling at messages she never explained. I told myself people change, life moves on, and healing looks different for everyone. About a year after the breakup, Lena started pulling away. Not dramatically, just enough to make me feel like I was always the one reaching out. She said work was busy, that she was tired, that she needed time to focus on herself. I understood. I gave her space. I told myself friendship didn't mean constant closeness, that real bonds could survive distance. Then one afternoon, I received a message that made my stomach drop before I even opened it. It was a photo. A ring on a familiar hand, Lena's hand. The caption read, "I said yes." For a brief, foolish moment, I felt happy for her. I typed out congratulations, my heart pounding with excitement for my best friend. Then I noticed the background, the living room, the couch, Adam's couch. My fingers went numb. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for explanations that didn't make sense. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a coincidence. But deep down, I knew. I knew before she called me later that night, her voice trembling, telling me there was something she needed to explain. She said it happened slowly. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said love just happened. I don't remember much of that conversation. I remember the sound of my own breathing, sharp and uneven. I remember asking how long and her hesitation before answering. 2 years. 2 years of secrets, of shared smiles behind my back, of a relationship built on the ruins of... I didn't respond to the invitation right away. I placed it on my kitchen counter like it was something fragile, something that might explode if I touched it again. For days, I walked past it, pretending it wasn't there, pretending my world hadn't just tilted in a way that made everything unfamiliar. People talk about closure like it's a gift you can choose to unwrap. What they don't tell you is that sometimes closure is forced on you, sharp and sudden, without your consent. Lena kept texting me. Long messages filled with apologies, explanations, memories of our friendship. She reminded me of everything we'd been through together, as if that history could somehow excuse what she'd done. She said she hoped one day I'd understand. That word, understand, felt like salt on an open wound. Understanding didn't erase betrayal. It didn't rewind time or give me back the version of myself who trusted without fear. Adam reached out too. That surprised me more than I expected. He said he hadn't planned for things to happen this way, that life was complicated, that he still respected me. Respect. I stared at that word on my phone and felt something cold settle in my chest. Respect would have been honesty. Respect would have been distance. Respect would have been not building a life with my best friend while I cried on her shoulder about losing him. I started replaying the past with a clarity that hurt. Moments that once felt harmless now carried weight. Lena encouraging me to move on a little too eagerly, her subtle questions about whether Adam and I might ever get back together, her reassurance that he wasn't right for me. I had mistaken her guidance for care, not realizing it was paving the way for her own future. The day I finally responded to the invitation, my hands were shaking. I typed and deleted the same sentence over and over. In the end, all I wrote was that I needed time. Time felt like the only thing I could ask for without breaking completely. Lena replied almost immediately, saying she understood, that she'd give me space. For the first time in years, her words felt hollow. Friends and family started finding out before I was ready to talk about it. News travels fast when it's shocking enough. Some people told me I should be happy for them, that love finds strange paths. Others were furious on my behalf, calling Lena names I wasn't ready to say out loud. I felt caught in between, numb and exhausted, unsure which reaction hurt more. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining their life together. I pictured the way Adam used to look at me, the way Lena used to laugh at my jokes, now turned toward each other. I wondered if they talked about me, if my pain ever crossed their minds when they planned their future. That wondering became its own kind of torment. I tried therapy, I tried journaling, I tried throwing myself into work. Healing became my full-time job, though I didn't feel like I was getting paid for it. Some days I felt strong, convinced that I was better off without either of them in my life. Other days, I missed Lena more than Adam. Losing a romantic partner hurt. but losing a best friend felt like losing a part of my identity. One afternoon, Lena showed up at my door unannounced. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she looked smaller somehow, less confident than the woman I remembered. She cried before she even spoke, telling me she hated that things had turned out this way. She said she wished she could go back and do things differently. I listened in silence, my heart pounding, my thoughts tangled. I asked her a question I'd been carrying for months. I asked her if she ever thought about me while she was falling in love with him. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She said yes, but that feelings aren't logical, that she didn't choose who she loved. I told her she did choose secrecy. She did choose to lie. She did choose herself over our friendship. That was the moment I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. I could forgive her someday for my own peace, but that didn't mean allowing her back into my life. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. I told her I needed distance, real distance, not polite silence filled with guilt. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and left without another word. The wedding date crept closer. I still hadn't decided whether I would go. Part of me wanted to face it, to prove I was stronger than the betrayal. Another part of me knew sometimes strength looks like walking away. I imagined sitting in a room full of smiling faces, applauding a union built on my heartbreak. The thought made my chest ache. The night before the RSVP deadline, I sat with the invitation one last time. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed loyalty was unbreakable. I thought about the woman I was becoming, someone learning to choose herself even when it hurt. With a deep breath, I marked my response. I wished them well in my heart, not for them, but for me. Then I let go. That choice didn't heal me overnight, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Control of my story, my boundaries, my future. And as painful as that chapter was, it was far from over. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of a reckoning you never saw coming. After I declined the invitation, a strange quiet settled over my life. It wasn't peaceful, not at first. It was the kind of silence that rang in my ears, heavy with everything left unsaid. Lena stopped messaging entirely. Adam never reached out again. In a way, that hurt almost as much as their betrayal. 6 years of love, over a decade of friendship, reduced to nothing but unanswered memories. I thought that once the decision was made, once I chose not to attend the wedding, the pain would start to fade. Instead, it shifted. It became subtler, less sharp, but more constant, like an ache that reminded me of itself at the worst possible moments. I'd be grocery shopping and see a brand Adam loved. I'd hear a song Lena and I used to sing in the car. Grief has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. The wedding day arrived on a bright Saturday morning. I knew the date without looking at the calendar. My body remembered it, my heart bracing itself before my mind could catch up. I turned off my phone and spent the day alone on purpose. I went for a long walk, letting the sun warm my face, trying to remind myself that life existed beyond that one moment. Still, every hour felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. That evening, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on and scrolled through social media, knowing exactly what I'd find and hating myself for looking anyway. There they were, photos of Lena in white, Adam beside her, smiling like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Friends commented with hearts and congratulations. No one mentioned me. No one mentioned the history that led them there. And I realized something painful but freeing. Their happiness didn't require my suffering to be acknowledged. My pain existed whether anyone saw it or not. I cried that night, not because I wanted them back, but because I finally accepted that the chapter was truly closed. Closure isn't a conversation or an apology. Sometimes it's simply the moment you stop expecting one. I went to sleep exhausted, but when I woke up the next morning, there was a strange lightness in my chest. The worst had happened, and I had survived it. It was almost a year after their wedding when the knock came. I remember the sound clearly because it interrupted a rare moment of peace. I had just finished making tea, the steam curling softly into the air, when the knock echoed through my apartment. It wasn't frantic or aggressive, just firm, intentional. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my heart dropped into my stomach. Lena stood there. She looked different, not in the obvious ways like her hair or clothes, but in her energy. The confidence she once carried so effortlessly seemed dimmed. Her eyes, once bright with certainty, looked tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, thick with history. Finally, she asked if we could talk. My first instinct was to close the door, protect my peace, but something in her expression made me step aside, not because I owed her anything, but because I owed myself clarity. She sat on my couch, the same couch she used to curl up on during movie nights years ago. The familiarity felt surreal. I stayed standing for a moment before sitting across from her, careful to leave space between us. She didn't waste time. She told me her marriage wasn't what she thought it would be, that guilt had followed her into it like an uninvited guest, that trust, once broken, has a way of haunting every new beginning. She admitted that sometimes she wondered if what they built together had started too shakily to ever feel solid. I listened quietly, surprised by how calm I felt. A year ago, hearing that might have satisfied something bitter inside me, but now it just sounded sad. She wasn't there to blame Adam. She wasn't there to ask me to fix anything. She said she needed to apologize properly, without excuses. She said she had spent months convincing herself that love justified everything, but deep down, she knew she had betrayed more than a friendship. She had betrayed the person who trusted her most. Her voice broke when she said that, and for the first time since all of this began, I saw not the bride, not the woman who chose my ex, but the girl I used to stay up with until 2 a.m., talking about dreams and fears. It would have been easier if she had come angry or defensive, but remorse is complicated. It softens edges you want to keep sharp. I asked her something I hadn't dared to before. I asked if she loved him while he was still with me. The question lingered in the air. She swallowed hard before answering. She said she didn't know when the feelings began, that it wasn't intentional, that emotional lines blurred before she realized they were crossed. She insisted nothing physical happened until after the breakup. I believed her, and somehow that didn't make it better. Emotional betrayal can cut just as deep as physical, sometimes deeper. She told me Adam had changed since they got married, that he was distant sometimes, guarded. She admitted she wondered if she might one day do to him what she had done with him. Trust, once broken, doesn't just vanish. It lingers like a shadow over every argument, every late-night silence. As she spoke, something clicked inside me. Their relationship hadn't been a fairy tale stolen from me. It was two people who made a choice under messy circumstances, now living with the consequences of that choice. That realization didn't bring me joy. It brought perspective. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said she missed me more than she ever imagined, that in choosing him, she had underestimated what losing me would cost. She said she had traded a friendship built on years of loyalty for a love that began in secrecy, and sometimes she wasn't sure the exchange had been worth it. Those words could have been a victory, but they felt like grief, because no matter what she said now, the past couldn't be undone. We couldn't go back to who we were. I told her the truth. I told her I had forgiven her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I told her forgiveness didn't mean access. It didn't mean we could pick up where we left off. Some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Tears streamed down her face quietly. She nodded, accepting what she already seemed to know. She didn't argue, she didn't beg, she just thanked me for listening. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. She said she hoped one day I would find a love that felt safe. That word again, safe. It used to mean comfort and certainty. Now it meant boundaries and self-respect. After she left, I sat alone in my living room, processing everything. I expected to feel shaken, maybe even reopened, but instead I felt steady, stronger than before. Hearing her regret didn't heal the wound, it confirmed something important. I hadn't imagined the betrayal. I hadn't overreacted. My pain had been valid all along. That night I realized something else too. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't bitterness or exposure. It's growth. It's becoming so secure in yourself that the people who hurt you no longer have the power to define you. I didn't know what would happen to their marriage. That wasn't my story anymore. What was my story was this. I survived the ultimate backstab. I rebuilt myself from the pieces they left behind. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever came next. Because healing doesn't mean the past disappears. It means the past no longer controls your future. After Lena left that night, I expected the past to loosen its grip completely. I had faced her, heard her remorse, spoken my truth. It felt like the final conversation we were always meant to have. But healing isn't a straight line, and closure doesn't always arrive wrapped in a single moment. Sometimes it unfolds slowly, layer by layer, revealing emotions you didn't realize were still there. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking less about the betrayal and more about myself, about who I had been in that friendship, who I had been in that relationship. For so long, I defined myself as loyal, supportive, the one who held everything together. I prided myself on being understanding, forgiving, patient. But somewhere along the way, I had confused selflessness with self-erasure. I started to see small patterns I had ignored before. The times Lena dismissed my feelings as overthinking. The moments Adam avoided difficult conversations and I smoothed them over to keep the peace. I wasn't responsible for their choices, but I was responsible for how much of myself I had given without demanding the same in return. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me aware, and awareness is powerful. Around that time, I met someone new. His name was Daniel. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. We met at a mutual friend's small dinner gathering. He wasn't loud or overly charming. He was steady, present. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. The first thing I noticed about him wasn't attraction. It was calm. When he asked about my past relationships, I hesitated, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want my story to be reduced to a headline, "Best friend marries ex." So I told him the truth in simple terms. I said I had experienced betrayal, that it taught me a lot about boundaries. He didn't press for details. He just nodded and said, "You deserved better." Those 3 words landed differently than they had before. They didn't feel like pity, they felt like acknowledgement. As Daniel and I started spending more time together, I noticed something unfamiliar. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't checking his phone when it buzzed. I wasn't reading into every delayed text. I had expected betrayal to make me paranoid forever. Instead, it made me cautious but clear. I asked direct questions, I expressed concerns without apologizing for them. And when he responded with honesty instead of defensiveness, I felt something shift inside me. One evening, months into dating, I told him the full story, the long version, the messy version. He listened quietly, his hand resting gently over mine. When I finished, I braced myself for judgment or discomfort. Instead, he said something that surprised me. He said, "Their choices don't define your worth, but how you handled it says everything about your strength." Strength? I hadn't thought of myself that way. I had thought of myself as someone who endured, who survived. But maybe endurance is strength? Maybe choosing peace over revenge is strength? Maybe walking away instead of fighting for people who already chose someone else is strength. Meanwhile, through mutual acquaintances, I heard fragments about Lena and Adam's marriage. Nothing dramatic, just small hints of tension, disagreements, distance. I didn't seek out the information, but it found me anyway. And every time it did, I checked in with myself. Did it make me feel vindicated? Superior? No, it made me feel certain. Certain that I had stepped away from something that was never meant to be mine again. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after their wedding, I ran into Lena again. This time, it wasn't emotional. It was almost neutral. She looked older, not in age, but in experience. We exchanged polite greetings. She asked how I was. I told her I was happy, not in a boastful way, just honestly. She nodded slowly, as if measuring the truth of my words. Then she said she was glad. There was no tension, no tears, just two women who once shared everything, now sharing nothing but a brief moment of civility. And strangely, that felt right. As I walked away, I realized something profound. The ultimate backstab hadn't destroyed me, it had redirected me. It forced me to evaluate the kind of love and friendship I was willing to accept. It taught me that loyalty should never be one-sided, that trust is sacred, and that when someone shows you who they are, you don't argue, you adjust. Daniel eventually became more than someone I was dating. He became my partner in the truest sense, not because he replaced Adam, but because he met me where I stood, whole, healed, aware. When he proposed, it wasn't in a grand public display. It was quiet, intentional. He told me he didn't just love me, he respected me. And after everything I had been through, that word meant more than any grand gesture. On the day we got married, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Not the naive kind, not the blind trust of my 20s, but the grounded, chosen kind, the kind built on honesty and mutual effort. As I walked down the aisle, I wasn't thinking about Lena. I wasn't thinking about Adam. I was thinking about the woman I had become. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the friendship, the relationship, the years invested. I don't, because every experience shaped me, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. The ultimate backstab wasn't the end of my story. Marriage didn't erase my past. It didn't magically seal every crack left behind by betrayal. But what it did give me was contrast. And sometimes contrast is the clearest teacher of all. With Daniel, love felt steady instead of fragile. There were no hidden conversations, no vague reassurances that left me doubting myself. If something bothered me, I said it. If something bothered him, he said it. We didn't dance around discomfort. We faced it. In the early months of our marriage, I caught myself bracing for things that never came. If he was late from work, a small voice inside me would whisper, "What if?" If his phone lit up late at night, my eyes would flick toward it before I could stop myself. Trauma leaves echoes. Even when you healed, it sometimes taps you on the shoulder to remind you where you've been. One night, after I had gone unusually quiet during dinner, Daniel asked gently, "Where did you just go?" He had noticed the shift in my energy. I hesitated before telling him the truth. I admitted that sometimes I still feared being blindsided, that a part of me expected love to come with a hidden cost. He didn't laugh, he didn't dismiss it. He reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "I'm not responsible for what they did, but I am responsible for how I love you now." That sentence stayed with me. Love isn't about promising perfection, it's about taking responsibility for how your actions affect the person beside you. Over time, those echoes grew quieter, not because I forced them to, but because consistency replaced suspicion. Day after day, Daniel chose transparency, and day after day, I chose trust, not blindly, but intentionally. Trust isn't a gift you hand over once and forget. It's a decision you renew. About 3 years into my marriage, I received unexpected news. A mutual friend called to tell me that Lena and Adam were separating. There'd been tension for a while, apparently. Arguments about trust, about timing, about whether their foundation had ever truly been stable. I listened quietly, absorbing the information without reacting. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel validation. What I felt was clarity. Their story had followed its own course, separate from mine. Whatever happened between them now wasn't karma, wasn't justice. It was simply the consequence of two people navigating a relationship that began in complicated circumstances. A week later, Lena reached out again. This time there was no pretense. She told me they were divorcing. She said she wasn't calling for sympathy. She just wanted me to know from her, not through gossip. Her voice sounded tired but calmer than before. I surprised myself by responding kindly, not warmly, not intimately, but kindly. I told her I hoped she found peace, and I meant it. Holding on to resentment would have tethered me to a chapter I had already outgrown. After that call, I thought about something that had taken me years to understand. Betrayal often feels like a personal attack, like someone looked at you and decided you weren't enough. But sometimes it has more to do with who they are than who you are. Lena's choices reflected her confusion, her desires, her impulsivity. Adam's choices reflected his. None of it was a measurement of my value. That realization was freeing. For so long, I had questioned what I lacked. Was I too complacent, too forgiving, too predictable? But love isn't a competition where someone wins by being more exciting or available. Real love is built on alignment, and alignment can't be forced. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I told Daniel about Lena's divorce. He listened quietly before asking how I felt. I searched for the right word. "Finished," I finally said. Not cold, not detached, just complete. He squeezed my hand and smiled softly, then let it stay finished. And I did. Looking back now, I see the entire journey differently. The friendship that once felt unbreakable, the relationship that once felt permanent, the betrayal that once felt unbearable. All of it shaped me, but none of it owns me. I learned that loyalty without boundaries becomes self-sacrifice, that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, that closure isn't given, it's created. And most importantly, I learned that someone else's betrayal cannot diminish your inherent worth. Sometimes people still ask if I would ever rebuild a friendship with Lena. My answer is simple. Some relationships belong to a specific season of your life. They serve their purpose, teach their lesson, and then end. Trying to resurrect them only reopens wounds that have already healed. I don't hate her. I don't hate him. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. What I feel now is distance and peace. And if there's one thing I hope anyone listening takes from my story, it's this. The ultimate backstab doesn't have to be the ultimate ending. It can be the moment you finally choose yourself, the moment you stop chasing people who've already made their choice, the moment you realize that being left behind sometimes clears the path ahead. Because in losing them, I found something I didn't even know I was missing: myself. There is a strange kind of stillness that comes after a storm you never thought you'd survive. Not silence exactly, but steadiness. The kind where you wake up one morning and realize you're no longer carrying the weight of someone else's choices on your shoulders. That's where I found myself 5 years after the betrayal that once defined me. Daniel and I had built a quiet, solid life together. Nothing flashy, nothing curated for appearances, just honesty, shared responsibility, laughter that didn't feel forced, and disagreements that didn't feel like threats. We bought a small home with a porch that faced west, so every evening we could watch the sun sink below the trees. That porch became my symbol of everything I had learned. Because once upon a time, I thought love meant intensity. I thought friendship meant permanence. I thought loyalty meant enduring anything. But sitting on that porch, watching the sky change colors, I understood that love is consistency, friendship is integrity, and loyalty must go both ways, or it isn't loyalty at all. Occasionally, memories still surface. Not painful anymore, just distant. I'll remember the younger version of myself laughing with Lena over coffee, planning futures that never came. I'll remember the nights I cried after Adam and I broke up, believing my life had collapsed, and I feel compassion for that version of me now. She didn't know what I know. She hadn't yet learned how strong she could be. One afternoon, I received a message from a young woman I didn't know. She said she had heard about my story through mutual acquaintances and was going through something similar. Her best friend had started dating her ex shortly after their breakup. She asked me how I survived it. I stared at her message for a long time before replying, because survival sounds dramatic, like something heroic. But what I told her was simple. I told her I survived by choosing myself when it felt unnatural, by resisting the urge to beg for explanations, by accepting that closure doesn't require agreement, and by understanding that someone else's betrayal is not proof of your inadequacy. After I sent that message, I realized something else. My story no longer belonged to the people who hurt me. It belonged to me. I could use it as a wound or as wisdom. A few months later, I unexpectedly saw Lena one last time. It was at a community event downtown. She was alone, standing near a table of refreshments. When our eyes met, there was no shock, no tension, just recognition. We walked toward each other slowly, like two people approaching a memory rather than a person. She looked different again, lighter somehow. Life had clearly reshaped her, too. We spoke briefly. She told me she had moved cities for a fresh start, that therapy had helped her understand why she made the choices she did. She didn't ask for forgiveness again. She didn't revisit the past. Instead, she said something I hadn't expected. She thanked me. She said losing me forced her to confront parts of herself she had ignored for years, that our broken friendship became the mirror she needed. She admitted she had once confused desire with destiny. She said she now understood the cost of crossing boundaries. Listening to her, I felt no urge to reopen anything, just acknowledgement. Growth had touched us both, separately, and that was enough. Before we parted, she said she hoped I was truly happy. I smiled and told her I was, and for the first time in years, that statement carried no hidden ache. When I walked back to Daniel that evening, I realized something profound. The ultimate backstab had once felt like the end of my identity, but it had actually been the beginning of my boundaries. It had forced me to redefine what I would tolerate, what I deserved, and what I would never accept again. That betrayal sharpened my discernment. It taught me that not everyone who stands beside you is standing for you. It showed me that sometimes the people closest to you can justify hurting you if it benefits them. But it also revealed something beautiful. Your resilience often hides in places you've never had to look before. If Lena had never married Adam, I might have stayed the same version of myself forever, forgiving too quickly, ignoring red flags, equating longevity with loyalty. Instead, I evolved. And evolution is uncomfortable. It requires loss. It requires confrontation. It requires standing alone for a while. But on the other side of it is clarity. Now, when I look at my life, I don't see a story about betrayal. I see a story about awakening, about a woman who learned that her value doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's choices, about discovering that peace feels better than revenge ever could. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own backstab, if the person you trusted most has chosen someone else or chosen themselves at your expense, please hear me when I say this. Their decision is not a verdict on your worth. You can grieve it, you can rage about it, you can cry until your chest aches, but do not shrink yourself to fit into a narrative where you are the one who lost. Because sometimes the one who walks away with their integrity intact is the one who truly wins. And if you'd like to hear the final chapter of this journey, the lesson that took me years to fully understand, there's something I haven't said yet, not because I was hiding it, but because it took me years to fully understand it myself. When Lena married Adam, I thought I lost. I thought she won. I thought he chose her because she was better in some way, more exciting, more compatible, more everything. I compared myself in quiet moments, wondering what she offered that I didn't. That comparison lingered longer than I ever admitted out loud. But here's what I finally realized. Love is not a prize someone wins by being better. It's not a competition where the most desirable person gets chosen. Love is alignment, and alignment can't be forced, stolen, or borrowed. It either exists or it doesn't. Adam didn't choose Lena because she was superior. He chose her because at that time their desires aligned. And Lena didn't betray me because I was lacking. She betrayed me because she prioritized her feelings over our friendship. Their choices reflected who they were in that season, not who I was. Understanding that changed everything. For years, I carried the invisible weight of comparison. I'd look at my reflection and wonder if there was something I needed to fix, something I needed to improve so I would never be replaced again. But people are not replaceable objects. We are experiences. We are connections. And no two connections are the same. Daniel didn't love me because I had transformed into someone flawless. He loved me because we fit. Our values aligned, our communication aligned, our timing aligned. Timing. That's another lesson I learned the hard way. When Adam and I broke up, I saw it as failure. I thought love ending meant love wasn't strong enough. But sometimes love ends because growth pulls two people in different directions. And sometimes when one person is still figuring themselves out, they make choices that hurt others along the way. That doesn't excuse betrayal, but it explains immaturity. If I'm honest, I don't think Lena set out to destroy our friendship. I think she convinced herself that happiness justified the risk. I think she told herself that if Adam and I were meant to be, we would have worked out. It's easy to rationalize when your heart wants something badly enough. But here's the truth I stand on now. Real love never requires secrecy to survive. Real friendship never asks you to betray someone to secure it. The ultimate backstab felt like humiliation at first. It felt like public defeat. But years later, I see it differently. It was redirection. It was revelation. It was the moment I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's decision. And here's the quiet truth I hold now. The person who betrays you often loses more than you do. They lose the version of you that trusted them completely. They lose access to your loyalty. They lose the privilege of your presence. You, on the other hand, gain clarity, strength, self-respect. That's not loss, that's transformation. If I could speak to the woman I was on the day that cream-colored wedding invitation arrived, I would tell her this: cry if you need to, rage if you must, but do not beg, do not shrink, do not believe that this moment defines your future. Because one day, you'll look back at that invitation and realize it wasn't announcing their beginning, it was announcing yours. And that is the real ending of this story.